Hi, my name is Kees, and today I'll tell you about 3 types of surrender which you can use as a spiritual practice. And the first one is just plain surrendering at some point, using it as a technique on its own. The idea of surrender in general is to go back to your natural state, because what's inhibiting you from feeling your natural self is your resistance to whatever is happening in the mind, in the body, in circumstances. And to surrender at some point, which is the first technique, is to basically something happens in your life and you're like, okay, I surrender to this. I'm okay with this, or I am now deciding that this is okay. That this is okay as it is, which it is, because everything is happening in and out of okayness. This is a safe universe, you could say, and it's safe because there's nothing that can go wrong. You are energy, you are God, you are everything, and everything is just happening. And it can feel like something is going wrong. Let's say you have some negative circumstances which happen to you, but in fact, from a natural standpoint, from a unity standpoint, from a God perspective, it's already okay. From a human perspective, some circumstances are definitely not okay, and that's also good to look at. But you'll notice when you stop struggling with what is, which is the essence of surrender, that you'll feel a lot better, that you have a lot more energy, that you're so much more relaxed, that you can deal with what is currently happening way more easily, because what inhibits our action usually is resistance. What inhibits our action is not the lack of will to act. It's usually our resistance to what is, which inhibits us to act, because we're doing a mind game. This shouldn't be the case. Why am I doing this? Why is this even happening? Right? And because of that mind game, we can't focus on our actions right now that would help the situation, right? So surrender is this amazing technique which helps us easily return to our natural state, that of relaxation and oneness. And how do we do that? That's actually, you have 3 techniques, right? I'm saying the first technique is learning to surrender in the moment. So something comes up which we don't like, and we just try to go with it, whether that's a feeling, an emotion, something happening, somebody saying something. Instead of resisting it, you're basically not resisting it, and you're letting it be as it is, and you're acting from that point. By surrendering, you're feeling into basically, this is already happening, this is okay that it's happening, and how can I, from this moment, which I accept, what is my natural feeling of a natural course of action? What is my natural response? Not responding from resistance, but responding from surrender, from acceptance. That's something to experiment with if you're new with surrender in general. I think the 2 more advanced and 2 more extreme versions, which are very, very potent for those that are really looking to integrate their natural state into their lives, or maybe feel called to go on this deep spiritual quest, you could say, or search. Or I came from a search, and then I found this. It worked for me extremely well, and I knew that if I would just do this, that I would lock in this natural state, and I did. And there are 2 ways. What I started with is actually surrender of the body. And that means you give the body permission to move however it wants to move. Basically, that's your actions. You give away your worldly actions. How do you do that? You give away your worldly actions by just allowing the body to move, whatever the mind says. If the mind says something like, oh, you should do this, you should do that, you just say, as a thought, and I move on, right? And if the body wants to do that, let's say the thought is, I should make a video. If the body wants to make the video, totally fine. If the body presses the button to say, let's go, totally fine. If it doesn't, totally fine. You try to surrender to what the body is doing. That's a great starting point, but it's also very difficult because you'll see that this deep spiritual technique will bring about a lot of resistance because the mind will resist you trying to basically give away its power, because the mind has a lot of power over the body. And especially if you let the mind control the body like this, you don't free the body, but you allow the mind to continuously put its will upon the body, and the body is not free. The mind itself is doing something which it doesn't want because it's controlling something. The mind is actually not for control. The mind is used most efficiently for bringing up convenient suggestions, by bringing up good facts, by bringing up great memories. It's kind of like it's a helping machine. It's kind of like a computer. If the computer is in control, we have a big problem, right, of your life. But if you can use the computer to make great things happen, that's amazing. And the mind is just the same. You, God, awareness, in this body have a mind that you can use perfectly for doing great things, for giving suggestions, for remembering stuff. It's amazing. But if you let the mind in control, which most people are doing, which we train people to do from a young age, then what happens? Very simply, we get mind addicted. The mind tries to control everything and has a lot of frustration, has a lot of resistance because it's not learned the natural state. We allow the mind to come up with everything and let it control everything. With this first technique, surrender of the body, we're taking that control from the mind. We're saying the body can move however it wants to move, and the mind is not responsible for the body in that way anymore. If the body does something, great. This is an intense practice which you can try, and it's a beautiful starting point. A second thing, which is smaller, but it's actually a little bit more advanced, is surrendering of the mind itself. When you surrender the body, what you notice is that the body is moving freely. It's costing a lot less energy. It's just relaxed. And movements are really easy. A second thing which you can do is this surrendering of the mind, where the mind in itself is still thinking of ways to control. Even though it has no control, it's still thinking of ways to control. It's still thinking of optimizations. It's still thinking of these suggestions to try to improve your life. And what happens is that we can go with that suggestions because we still feel that there's something to improve. Basically, the mind is sometimes triggering us, you could say, not to surrender or to do something from a place of lack. This mental surrender is very subtle. It's not a big thing, right? But it's a very subtle, nuanced thing where you should try to avoid these mental suggestions that come from a place of lack. You could say they're shallow suggestions, shallow ways of trying to control the outcome. And usually that's happening via doing certain techniques or trying to control the body in a way again. The path of surrender, which is different than the path of discipline, because the path of discipline is very much about trying to force yourself into presence, basically destroying everything which is not based on presence. It's a forceful thing. And the path of surrender is trying to let go of everything that is forceful by allowing it, by not resisting it. And that gives you layer upon layer upon layer of relaxation, bringing you back to your natural state. This mental surrender is extremely important. Why? Because at some point you can have a sticking point with this surrendering of the body. And the sticking point is the mind itself is still trying to optimize. And how do we sort of deal with that? And that's by very subtly noticing what place the mental suggestion is coming from. And not trying to let it control anything. Not thinking of techniques, for example. If you have some helpful techniques, it's easy to use that as a sort of mental sticking point. You're staying on to that technique. Let's say I'm having a lot of benefit from meditation. And I notice that the body is wanting to meditate as well, so I'm allowing that. Then what the mind can do is it starts sort of taking over that mental suggestion of meditation. It would say to you, well, you should meditate every day. Well, you should meditate in the morning. Well, you should meditate like this, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes. It will try to take over this natural thing by structuring it again, by bringing it back, by sort of focusing it in a certain way, by not allowing the natural flow of things. It's a nuanced thing for advanced practitioners to notice where are these mental suggestions coming from, and are they from a place of surrender? Am I doing the suggestion, or is the suggestion coming, and then is the body responding to that? Because what often happens is how you can see that you give up the surrender of the body is by the surrender of the mind, not by the mind coming up with certain suggestions, which actually are based on a place of lack, are based on the ego, you could say, are based on energetic investments we've done in past wants and needs and desires. And then they are coming up, and we notice that the mind is then trying to also control the body. It's a nuanced way in which the mind is trying to control the body again. And when you go along with this, you start noticing you have less energy. You go down this whole rabbit hole of feeling worse and worse, even though you can feel a sort of mind satisfaction of finally I'm having control again, right? But you're feeling not free. You're feeling cut off from your naturalness. You're feeling cut off from your high energy state. And that's because you've just allowed the mind to do something which it wants, but it is not natural for the mind. I would say if you're on this path to surrender, you start with trying to surrender in the moment, and then you try with more difficult things, and then at some point you realize, I'm going to surrender the body. I'm just going to see where this ends up. And where it ends up is peace, naturalness, love, and often good results as well. And a lot of purging from the mind that with all this identity, with all these beliefs, with all these ideas of you're not good enough unless you do X, Y, Z, right? Or you're not worth it unless you do X, Y, Z. And you just purge from that. What happens is these beliefs fall away because they don't have any energetic investment anymore. You are good enough already. And you start to feel that because you've purged these beliefs, you've not acted on them, so they've died off. That's what they call ego death. It's a sort of the dying of the separate self that is unnatural. These are 3 ways to surrender. I invite you to play with them to see what makes sense to you. And I would say first try to surrender in the moment, then try the surrender of the body, and then you notice at some point the nuance point of the mental surrender and where things are coming from. And if the mind is trying to control the body again through giving these genius suggestions, which can make sense for you from a place of surrender, but if you go along and you don't pay attention, you're just taking away and you're not in surrender anymore, but you're trying to control that the mental suggestion will work out, which is creating suffering and karma again. If you're interested in this, I have more videos on surrender. Check them out and have a nice day.